Most people think a millionaire looks like something: a fast car sitting in the driveway, a designer watch catching the light, a house big enough to make the whole neighborhood quietly jealous. That's the picture we all carry in our heads. So here's something that might genuinely surprise you. A lot of real millionaires are almost impossible to spot. They drive normal cars, they wear plain clothes, they live in houses that look exactly like yours, and the ones making all the noise, the flashy ones, the loud ones, the ones who look rich, are very often the people quietly drowning in debt behind the scenes. Think about that for a second. The person you assume is rich might actually be broke, and the quiet neighbor you never think twice about might be sitting on more money than everyone else on the street combined. Today we're going to talk about the silent habits that actually build wealth, not the loud ones you see online, the quiet ones nobody ever posts about, because once you really see them, I promise you, you can't unsee them again. Let me tell you about someone I'll call Daniel. Daniel was a school teacher, not a business owner, not some investor with a secret talent for picking stocks, just a regular teacher who earned a regular, modest salary his entire working life. He packed his own lunch. He drove the same car for years. Nothing about him said money. And then, when he passed away, his family discovered something none of them expected. He had quietly built a small fortune. Not because he earned a fortune, but purely because of how he lived with the ordinary money he had. Nobody around him ever knew, and that's the part that really stays with me. The wealth was completely invisible while he was alive, because every single habit that built it was invisible too. I'll be honest with you. For a long time, I completely misunderstood how wealth actually works. I used to think rich people were simply people who earned a lot of money, that the whole game was about income, make more, have more. It seemed obvious. And then I started actually paying attention to the people who were quietly, genuinely wealthy, and almost none of them fit the picture I had in my head. Some of them earned less than people I knew who were constantly broke. That's the moment it finally clicked for me. Wealth isn't really about how much money comes in, it's about what quietly happens to that money after it comes in. And that one difference changes everything. So let's talk about the first silent habit. Wealthy people spend less than they can, not less than they want, less than they can. And there's a huge difference between those two things. You probably know someone who got a raise, and within a month, their spending had quietly grown to match it perfectly. A bigger apartment, a nicer car, new clothes, new gadgets, new everything. Their income went up, but somehow, mysteriously, their savings didn't move at all. This happens to almost everyone, and the scary part is it's completely invisible while it's happening. It never feels like a decision, it just feels like life getting a little nicer. Quietly wealthy people do the exact opposite. When their income goes up, their lifestyle stays roughly where it was. They let the raise turn into savings instead of stuff, so the gap between what they earn and what they spend keeps slowly growing. And that gap, that quiet, boring, unglamorous gap, is where wealth is actually built. Not in the size of the paycheck, in the empty space between the paycheck and the lifestyle. That space is the whole secret, and almost nobody protects it. Here's the second silent habit, and it's an easy one to miss. They avoid the decisions that quietly drain them for years. Most people obsess over the small stuff. Skip the coffee, cancel one streaming subscription, feel guilty about a takeaway meal, and sure, those things matter a little. But quietly wealthy people focus their energy somewhere completely different. They focus on the big, slow, heavy decisions, the size of the house, the cost of the car, the monthly commitments that lock them in for years and years. Because a $5 coffee is a one-time thing you can always change tomorrow. But a house payment that's just a little too big is a decision that quietly taxes you every single month for the next 30 years, whether you notice it or not. Think of it like a small leak in a boat. One single drip won't sink you. You'll barely even see it. But a slow leak that you never bother to fix will absolutely sink the whole thing over enough time. Wealthy people become almost obsessed with finding the slow leaks, the ones nobody else notices, while the rest of the world is busy arguing about the price of a cup of coffee. They fix the thing that actually matters, and they ignore the noise. Now, here's the third habit, and this one is really more of a mindset than an action. Quietly wealthy people are genuinely comfortable being underestimated. Just think for a moment about how much energy the average person spends simply trying to look successful to other people. The clothes that signal a certain status, the car that's a little too expensive for what they actually make, the dinner photographed and posted for people who don't even really care, all of that costs real money, and most of the time it buys absolutely nothing except a few brief seconds of someone else's attention they forget almost immediately. The quietly wealthy have made a strange kind of peace with all of this. They're perfectly okay if you assume they're ordinary. They're okay driving the boring, reliable car. They're okay being the person nobody looks at twice. Because somewhere along the way, they figured out something most people never do in their entire lives. Looking rich and being rich are almost complete opposites. Every single dollar you spend trying to look rich is a dollar that can no longer be used to actually become rich. You have to choose one, and they quietly, consistently chose the second one every single time. Let me tell you about someone else. A woman who worked a normal office job for nearly 40 years. Her coworkers all assumed she was just getting by, scraping through like everyone else. She always brought her lunch from home in the same worn bag. She drove an old car that she flatly refused to replace, no matter how much people teased her. Honestly, some people probably felt a little sorry for her. And then she retired. And it quietly came out, almost by accident, that she had more money saved than nearly anyone she had ever worked alongside. She wasn't cheap, she wasn't miserable, she simply never once felt the need to prove anything to anybody. And that freedom, that deep, quiet freedom of not needing to prove yourself, is a habit too. Maybe it's the most powerful habit of all. The fourth silent habit is patience. And honestly, this is the one almost nobody actually wants to hear. Because it isn't exciting, it doesn't feel clever, building wealth quietly is slow, it's painfully slow, especially at the very beginning. For years, it can genuinely feel like nothing at all is happening. You save, you invest, you wait, and then you check the numbers, and they've barely moved an inch. And this is exactly where most people quietly quit. They look at their tiny, unimpressive progress, decide the whole thing clearly isn't working, and give up right before the interesting part was about to begin. Here's the thing about the way money actually grows over time. It doesn't grow in a straight line, it grows in a curve. For a long, boring stretch, it just crawls along, almost completely flat. And then slowly, very slowly, it starts to bend upward and then upward faster. The people who end up wealthy usually aren't smarter than everyone else around them. They aren't secretly gifted, they were simply still there, still holding on when the curve finally started to rise. They stayed in the game long enough to let time quietly do all the heavy lifting for them, and time only ever rewards the people who refuse to quit early. Now let me give you the fifth habit, because this one ties everything together. Quietly wealthy people almost never make emotional decisions with their money. When the news is full of panic, they don't panic sell everything they own. When everyone around them is suddenly excited about some new thing that's supposedly going to make everyone rich overnight, they don't rush in out of fear of missing out. They've trained themselves to feel the emotion and then wait and act slowly. Most people do the exact reverse. They buy when everyone feels excited and they sell when everyone feels scared, which is honestly the perfect recipe for slowly losing money over a lifetime. The quiet millionaire's real edge isn't a better prediction about the future, it's simply a calmer nervous system. They stay boring precisely when everyone else is getting emotional. Now, I want to be really careful here, because I know exactly how all of this can start to sound. I am not telling you to never ever enjoy your money. I am not saying you should live like you have nothing while the best years of your life quietly slip past you. That isn't wealth either, that's just fear of wearing a slightly different mask. The point was never to hoard every single dollar and then feel guilty about a nice dinner with people you love. The real point is simply to stop letting invisible habits quietly decide your entire future without ever asking for your permission. Because that, in the end, is really what all of this comes down to. These habits are silent for a very specific reason. Nobody sees them, nobody ever claps for them. There is no applause for the raise you chose not to spend, or the car you decided not to upgrade, or the long year you stayed patient when quitting would have felt so much easier. There's no audience for any of it, and then the results show up decades later, quietly almost all at once, right when everyone else around you is left wondering how on earth you did it. So here's what I'd really want you to just sit with for a moment. The loudest people are almost never the wealthiest ones in the room. The truly wealthy are usually the exact people you'd walk straight past on the street without a second glance. And the habits that quietly built their entire lives weren't dramatic or clever or impressive in the moment they were happening. They were small and boring and repeated over and over for years, back when absolutely no one was watching, not even them. The real question was never whether you can somehow earn more money someday. Maybe you will, and I hope you do. But that was never really the question. The real question is what you'll quietly choose to do with whatever actually comes in. Because the person who ends up wealthy is almost never the one who earned the very most. It's the one who, year after year after year, in complete silence, kept choosing the boring thing over the impressive one, and who quietly decided a long time ago that they never needed anyone else to notice.